Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 6. Ahsoka could feel the ground under her soft-booted feet, silently moving forward through the densest vegetation she had ever seen. Each footfall brought her closer to her quarry. She challenged internally the means to get as close as possible without spooking the beast. Broken branches, long since dropped by the trees too tall to identify, littered the ground between rocks, dead fallen leaves, and grayish-green vines. The brackish, mist-shrouded water to her right housed many things unseen, but present as their circular ripples signified. Closer to the prey she inched. Each step had its own challenge, silently advancing on the form 15 meters ahead of her. Fauna of all types called to one another in their songs of jubilant life, ignoring the stalker as it moved slowly through the swampy jungle. 10 meters. The blaring of native birds begins to cease, the toads becoming less inclined to relinquish their positions. The trees themselves quiet their rustle. 5 meters. All becomes deathly silent and still. The water freezes in place, the circular waves end their vigilant ripples. The air becomes heavy and thick. 1 meter. Ahsoka slowly reaches for her sabers, feeling the cool metallic hilts in both hands. The figure, the target, has form. A hooded figure looking away from her. 2 more steps. 1 more step. Ahsoka brings her sabers to bear, just as the hooded figure turns toward her. The olive skin, the blackened lips. Barriss Ophi. In the blink of an eye, Ahsoka ignites the sabers and tears and cleaves Barriss from head to toe. The carnage is relentless and brutal. In a heap at Ahsoka's feet is what remains of Barriss. Your anger makes you powerful, Padawan, Anakin says, a disembodied statement she feels more than hears. She switches off the sabers, realizing that the scene is bathed in a red glow. Ahsoka shot up screaming, banging her forehead on the bunk above her. She instantly regretted the move and instinctively moved her hand to cover the pain. Breathing heavily, she swiveled her legs onto the floor and remembered where she was. The dream felt so real, but what took the wind out of her was the fact that it didn't feel like a nightmare. Barriss didn't present to her anything remotely close to the personage of her most profound anger. In fact, she had inflected forgiveness toward Barriss for all that happened, as Ahsoka was feeling the same tension within herself, but directed towards the Order for what it was turning into. She would have chosen different methods of change, however, to be sure. She thought about her surroundings from the dream, and could not place it anywhere she had been or even heard of. Similarities, but nothing definitive. It could wait, she convinced herself, and got up from the simple, oddly comfortable bunk she had been laying in and began slipping her boots back on. Although barely audible, the singing birds from her dream had yet to quiet their renewed songs. She made her way past the astromech, attending to servicing cooling lines, and into the cockpit, noticing immediately that they were still in hyperspace. She realized she had only been asleep briefly. She found Kawani in what should have been the tack seat in the rear corner. She noticed the entirety of the tactical station, now servicing a projected image of the ship's schematics. Kawani with her feet up on the upper lip of the table. Screaming is a terrible way to wake up, Kawani remarked flatly. It seems to be the only way I wake up. That is, if I have time to sleep, Ahsoka realized more than said. Tano, by the way, my clan name, Ahsoka said assuredly. Ahsoka, I will admit to already knowing that. Your exploits throughout the Clone Wars were legendary and inspiring for a host of us, and for many reasons, Kawani admitted. The Empire can't scrub all data, she added with a smile. Then you understand I'm a fugitive, Ahsoka said outright. All Jedi are, providing that is what you are. Are you a Jedi, Ahsoka Tano? It was sincere. I was, but walked away from the Order before the war ended. It felt good to say, always felt good to say. Certain objectives didn't agree with me, nor did I with them, Ahsoka finished. Add yourself to the list that includes separatists, a corrupt Senate, and a daft empire, Kawani said. The number of stories is endless, but always ends the same way. Nothing good ever comes from too much of one thing. Even credits, she paused, chuckling. I make enough to get where I want to go, find something that interests me, do it for a time, then change things again. Like your Jedi. Too many of them, at one point anyway. She fell silent suddenly, then added, "The galaxy needs things in balance. Too much of one thing, then boom!" She slammed a fist into her palm for emphasis. The Force compensates by creating more of a lesser, so the scales don't bottom out. Hearing someone else mention the Force almost brought tears to Ahsoka's eyes, and Kawani picked up on the facial contortion Ahsoka had employed to fight them back. "Yes, Ahsoka, I know the Force. Not in the way you do, or did, or still do, not like a Jedi anyway. Miri Allen are all keen on the natural Force. We sense and feel it as if it were a smell, a touch, or a taste. We can feel it flow through us, and sense when it's blocked. There were many Mary Allen Jedi for that reason alone. My skill is feeling emotions and reading them only because that is how I see the Force flowing around me or through someone else. I feel your acceptance of what I am saying as a matter of fact, and I could, even if I wasn't looking at you. But I can feel your trepidation about sharing your past, which is why you don't. I'll end it there because I can see your relief already. And yes, I trust you." She added the last to answer the unasked question Ahsoka had ready for her. Averting her gaze to the transparent steel canopy, the hypnotic visuals of hyperspace only added to the affecting calm of talking with Kawani. Quick with a blaster, yet more interested in confusion than explosions. Adept at the art of conversation to know when silence is necessary. Yes, Ahsoka trusted her. Admitting she was usually the trusting type, she could innately sense that Mary Allen was different. She came right out and admitted initially that her interest in Ahsoka was in her piloting skills, but left the door open for other things to fall into place. And they were. "Kawani, I knew two Mary Allen Jedi, a master and an apprentice," Ahsoka said without turning her gaze from the blue spiral. Unduly, no doubt, Kawani was certain. "The apprentice?" "Barriss Ophi." Ahsoka struggled with the name of the person she had just murdered in her dream. "Ophi. Ophi. I'm not familiar with the name or even the family," she remarked. "We were good friends," Ahsoka said more to herself. "Want to share? Because I already know how you feel about it, or her, as it were," Kawani asked. "Yes, but another time. Some aspects are still fresh," admitted Ahsoka with gradual hesitation. "That sounds like a..." Kawani cut herself off as Navcom signaling alerted anyone in the cockpit that they had reached their destination. "Till later then, Ahsoka. Welcome to Nalhutta." Ahsoka needed to be more inspired by the claim and tried to focus on what had gotten her off Malachor to begin with, but not hearing Yoda again was getting discouraging with each passing moment. Kawani cut the hyperdrive as the planet snapped into view. "We have our choice of Bilbosa or Narshada, which will work for our purposes here," she pointed out. "Moving Klauzon is easier than finding breathable air," she finished. Ahsoka had either been privy to or been an accomplice to many clandestine affairs. This was no different. That Kawani seemed only to move mild commodities through black market dealings was not a reason to raise concern. The Mary Allen was growing on her by the minute, and she honestly didn't want to see her get into anything more nefarious, simply to keep her out of the more profound danger that could get her into. "I have no preference. The place has yet to endear itself to me," Ahsoka said honestly. "I'll admit, slimy mudholes aren't my preferred choice, but it isn't Malachor," Kawani said with a smile. "I'll set down on Narshada. It's easier to move ourselves if that becomes a need." Angling away from the planet, her course set to the large moon, the sublights engaged. 1 month ago. Palpatine was losing his patience with the assembled team on Lothal. Minister Varys Hayden, who was given an unlimited budget and as many resources as requested to deliver to his Emperor the answers requested, was beginning to connect various reports to unravel the secret behind the gateway. His latest discovery, the inclusion of Mortis, from data archived in the former Jedi Temple on Coruscant, although no clear ideas on how they are connected to the glyphs themselves. He was confident the section stone was inscribed instruction, but had no basis or cornerstone to begin any form of translation. He needed more data and time. knowing full well his Emperor had supplied him with as much as he would receive of both. Haydn had been included in the research at Palpatine's own request due to his diligence and passion for Jedi myth, and had taken his project to new heights since doing so. It was Haydn who identified this portion of the temple, identical to the temple on Jeddah, was a gateway to what he hadn't figured out yet. Palpatine could locate enough information on a gateway to understand time had no meaning in it, per the scrawling of Sith adepts from the Old Republic. How information like this gets lost to the ravages of time, I will never understand, Haydn remarked. He truly appreciated his Emperor's vision of enlightenment, and fully understood the wisdom under his control and the lasting effect of any real discovery he would make. If it were a path to a place where time is irrelevant, this empire would be immortal. Haydn again voiced his thought trail. Eternal, indeed. His eyes glimmered at the prospect. Present day. Upon receiving the report from the late Commander Kalev, Vader mulled his options. The last communique with the ship had received was from a shuttle that had never arrived, following reports of a disturbance at the small spaceport outside Vindal Township. The fact that there weren't any Imperial casualties, nor reports of reinforcements deployed, could only mean that whoever in sight of the disturbance was no longer there. Planet bound? Possibly, but there was nowhere to go on Vindal. The planet's proximity led him down many possibilities, but until more information was available, his options were too countless to measure. My lord, Director Krennic will be arriving shortly. Van E broke his train of thought. The skeletal and sallow-skinned human continued. My lord had asked me to notify him when the Bacta was prepared. He began, ushering himself back the way he had come. Distractions, Vader mumbled as he began removing the helmet. The Liberator descended into a private bay, and the landing sequence was initialized and transpiring. Ahsoka could only imagine how deep Kawani was into moving her cargoes if privatizing a bay for her was on the list of whomever her contact was. It is completely up to you if you stay on board or come with me, but coming with me will necessitate some cover on your part, as you have said, fugitive Tano, Kawani said, quite forthcoming with a slight grin. Agreed. What do you have on board? Ahsoka asked. A testament to goodwill and faith, I see, with the hastened response and commitment to our partnership, wherever it takes us, Kawani replied with a laugh. To the right, in my quarters. Take what you need. Ahsoka wheeled around and set to the task of finding something to mask her appearance upon walking into Kawani's quarters. An ankle-length robe of tan synth fiber with an oversized hood stood out almost immediately. It was at that precise moment the quiet song she had been hearing since her dream began to filter in with more volume. She could feel the song flowing through her body, her muscles relaxing to their vibrations, her bones soothed by its melody, her mind coming into singular focus by the ups and downs of the harmony. Immediately, she saw shapes in her vision. A moon moving into alignment with a planet she recognized but couldn't place. Obi-Wan, older, igniting his lightsaber. Yoda sitting on a fallen tree in the setting of her dream. Tarkin staring out a viewport. Bale's daughter standing in front of Vader. The scene stopped changing at the last. Vader turning as if to look her in the eye and outstretching his hand as if to greet her. His face changing to that of Anakin, mouthing words she couldn't hear. He kept repeating it over and over. Come home. Ahsoka snapped back to reality, grabbed the robe, and ran back to the cockpit, where Kawani finished the sequence to power down and prep lock all her gear. Kawani, I saw something, Ahsoka panted. In my room? What was it? If it's moving, I'm going to kill it. She shot out of her seat and immediately drew her blaster. No. The Force is reaching out. I believe it was a premonition, a vision of future events, Ahsoka said without really knowing, the song still playing its lulling tones for her. Do you hear it? Hear what? Kawani questioned with growing anticipation. Ahsoka suddenly realized she'd heard this song before, a bright but elusive melody. Her memory conjured visuals from her own distant and not so distant past, the song of the Kyber. Hers. But hers were at her hip, and they weren't the ones singing. Kawani, Is there Kyber on this ship? Kawani asked in growing desperation and more than avid curiosity. Sure is. 12 small Kuwati crates full. Why? I know we have an agenda here, but as things are kind of off the hip anyway, can you show me where they are? Absolutely. This way. Kawani set off for the aft smuggler's cargo hold. Of all things contraband in the Empire, Kyber's tops. In the last 2 to 3 years, the Empire had stripped, stolen, purchased, smuggled, and confiscated everything it could. I had been mining this for almost 2 years on Malachor, she confessed as she slid the hatch cover open and off the hold. They both slipped down to the bay. Ahsoka stopped Kawani from advancing further with a gentle hand on her arm and closed her eyes. It's not all of them, Kawani, only one. She knew it was true. Ahsoka could feel them, all of them. The living force in them was responding to her and calmly flowing into and out of each of one in a singular direction. She followed the path in her mind. The third crate from the bottom, center stack. Kawani keyed in the location on the data pad she had pulled from her pocket, and the crate issued forth, resting gently at Ahsoka's feet. Ahsoka knelt slowly, her eyes still closed, and placed both hands over the crate's lid, which hissed open, releasing its vacuum. The lid clanged to the floor as the assembled crystals showed brilliantly in the ambient light of the bay, but Ahsoka only focused on one. All currents from this and all the other crates were centralizing on a single crystal. Ahsoka could see the eddies of color changing as her mind assembled a new weapon. She could see greens, blues, oranges, yellows, purples, white, and even an absence of color. She could see metallic sheathing forming around a power assembly. Recharge socket and energy gate fit into a conductor, and a vortex ring wrapping around an insulated power cell. A focusing chamber assembled into an emitter, and this tiny crystal was seated at the center. Her controls nestled into an ignition switch chamber. The same metallic sheathing blackened as it came together in her mind. As she pressed her eyes tighter, her mind activated the new creation, bathing her vision in a deep maroon hue. The decision was hers, although she was hesitant to make it. Time stopped for her then, but she was determined to follow this through, wherever it took her. She exhaled ever so slowly, wrapped her fingers around the small crystal, clutching it away from its siblings, and pulled it to her chest. Ahsoka? What the hell just happened? Kawani didn't move a muscle. She didn't see anything outside of Ahsoka reaching into the crate and pulling out a single crystal. Still, she felt the currents, the eddies and flows of the living force magnified as she had never witnessed before, centering themselves to a single point, which was now pinched between two Togrutan fingers. She knew something significant had just transpired, but was bewildered by what it was. Ahsoka said only, a sign. Kawani felt it best to leave it at that. Ahsoka could not explain her vision. The saber constructed itself as her mind saw best to arrange it. The meaning behind the reddish beam, however, was a conundrum. She felt no inner turmoil, no need to submit to the darkness that always called, and in the same way she refused to let the light guide her entirely. Although inexplicable, she acknowledged her lack of fear. With certainty, she knew she would not yield to be swayed in either direction ultimately, but maintained her freedom to choose could swing one way or the other, depending on a great many things, and what a given situation called for more over the other. She could sum it up plainly with that, but knew she needed guidance for what came next, and she needed Master Yoda to be that guide. Kawani, I know what I must do, but I have no idea where to start, where to look, or where to go. What I just saw was exactly what I feared it may be. She looked down at the crystal between her fingers and then slowly placed it into her other hand's open palm. As we've been straightforward in our conversations, you witnessed that. The pull to a crystal is deep and individual. I used to assist younglings on voyages to Ilum when I was in the Order, and went through this process many times with them. A blade's color depends on many variables, and can be made to any shade imaginable by adding components or subtracting others. This build was simple, with no alterations to the emitter, yet shown a deep maroon. I tell you this in good faith, so that we remain in the realm of trust, to which we've grown accustomed. Kawani was speechless. At that moment, she had never known a more trusting bond, and knew there was nothing she would not do for this Togrutan. She felt the conviction in Ahsoka's every word. The concern over her reservations in the beginning touched her deeply. The color of the blade made absolutely no difference to her. It was Ahsoka that her trust was in, implicitly, and that fact brought a tear to her eye. Ahsoka was quick to embrace her in that small cargo bay, on a hut controlled moon in a time of unknowing. With that act, Ahsoka could finally let go of the last blame she had placed on Barriss unknowingly and cried her tears of absolution. Ahsoka, I started Kawani, but a knowing look from Ahsoka hushed her unfinished sentence. I know, I feel it too. And with that, Ahsoka slid the lid back on the crate and ascended the ladder back into the main hold, pulling Kawani up behind her. A bond was created, one she knew she could rely on. She began running through a litany of options to get her and them on the path she sought out. There was only one guide she knew she could rely on to help her unleash the darkness in a controlled manner. Yet the vision held Obi-Wan in favor for reasons she couldn't explain. There was nothing in the vision's surroundings to declare his location, however, and unless she took the time to meditate, time to connect with the depth of the Force itself, she would remain clueless. Kawani, there is little to act on, but I must find someone. One of my old masters. Ahsoka couldn't help but express the anguish she couldn't quite explain. I have no idea where he is, only that he lives. Ahsoka tried to explain, lifting her gaze slowly to match the Mirialans. Ahsoka, that's nothing to act on, Kawani said with sincerity, positive there had to be more to follow. However, the look within the Togrutan's own eyes said none would be forthcoming. I can feel your hesitation, your restraint, so tell me what you need me to do, she continued, changing course to offer solutions. I need to reach out to him. However, doing so could put us both in great danger, as it would surely draw unwanted attention. I usually don't attempt at planetside for that reason alone, Ahsoka explained. We would also need a distraction of sorts to waylay Imperial interest to a location of our choosing, which would, in effect, localize their efforts while leaving the galaxy a little less congested for our search, she added, seeing the smug grin turn into a faint smile on Kawani's face. She understood immediately where Ahsoka was going with that thought. A Jedi sighting, an active Jedi sighting on Nar Shaddaa, might just do that. Assuming, of course, your old master isn't in the system, she added wryly. About that refined Clauson, I think it's time to meet your buyer, Ahsoka said as she swung the robe over her shoulders, pulling the cowl high up over her montrals.